Let me see, is it working? So hi everyone, and welcome to this session on knowledge valorization and links with industry. So before we start, then I would just encourage you to scan the QR code to go into Slido, and of course select the Charleston room so you are in this session, because by the end of we will have some polls during the session here to engage the audience. And also by the end of the session, there will be an opportunity to ask questions. So please put them in here in the Slido. So my name is Bertil Egger-Beck. I'm working in the Commission in the DGRTD in the unit on open science and research infrastructures. I am in the team on EOSC governance, and I'm also covering the legislative enablers for open science, such as copyright data legislation, and also the possibilities for researchers to use research results in cooperation with the industry. And I will be moderating this session. So, here to knowledge valorization links with industry. So what we're going to discuss here today is just the potential of EOSC Federation to facilitate industry-academia collaboration. I will just give a short introduction about the context for the session before we give the floor to our great panel of various stakeholders who will explain just their perspective on how we can improve the framework of EOSC Federation for knowledge valorization. Firstly, a bit about EOSC and the links with the industry, because it has actually from the beginning been a vision for EOSC that industry should be involved, but it has not yet been at a stage of development where it could be operationalized. But now we are getting there, since we here at the EOSC Symposium have launched the EOSC Federation and also demonstrated the build-up of the federation and the enrollment of nodes. So that's why we can consider the EOSC Symposium a bit as a starting point for discussing how the plenty of knowledge resources that will be provided in EOSC Federation can be used for knowledge valorization and cooperation with the industry. But what have we adopted so far in EOSC on links with industry? You can see an overview here. If you go back to 2020, we had the European Strategy for Data, which is still setting the framework for the EU's work on data and digitalization. And there you can see there is a direct reference to EOSC saying that in the medium term, open up, connect, and articulate EOSC beyond the research communities with the wider public sector and the private sector from 2024 and onwards. So we can say we are a bit there behind schedule because we have not really worked strategically and in an operational way on this so far. Then there is an opinion paper from the steering board back from 2022, with specific recommendations on the collaboration with commercial partners, saying that EOSC should be a public good, but that there should also be a SWOT analysis on the participation of commercial partners in EOSC, so analyzing the strengths, the weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. It has not yet been done, but maybe it could be a topic for discussion at upcoming meetings in the tripartite governance. And then also do a review of the EOSC rules of participation in the view of the role commercial partners should have in EOSC, both as providers and as users. And I think the last point is important because obviously commercial partners, they have been involved in the Horizon Europe call topics on providing the infrastructure for EOSC, being both contractors and beneficiary, but how do we involve commercial partners as users of the knowledge resources that are in EOSC? And then lastly, there is a recommendation in the paper about exploring the synergies with other data spaces, also an important point, since EOSC is one of the 14 common European data spaces, and many of the other 13 data spaces have a commercial character, for example, the data space on transport and energy, etc., where there will be a potential for EOSC to have a closer collaboration with the private sector. Then also a few words about knowledge valorization, because this is also a key policy priority for the EU, and a lot has happened in recent years. You can see a bit here with the current policy agenda. Then the starting point was in 2022, when the Council adopted the guiding principles for knowledge valorization. Last year, there were also conclusions adopted by the Council on the importance of knowledge valorization for the EU's competitiveness and also for the ability of the EU to carry out the green and the digital transition. So it is saying directly that more efficient knowledge valorization is needed to achieve these broader policy objectives for the EU. And you say, what is knowledge valorization about? It is basically to maximize the social and economic impact of research and innovation in Europe, or said in another way, just to transform research results into products, services, or solutions that will somehow benefit society, either as a commercial product or as a solution that will have a societal benefit. And for that purpose, the Council has also adopted the codes of practice on knowledge valorization. There are some hyperlinks in here to where to find them on the website. But there are some codes of practice on intellectual asset management, standardization, industry academia co-creation, and citizen engagement. So there are already some specific recommendations and tools that can be used in order to start industry academia collaboration on knowledge valorization. And these are just providing some quite operational recommendations on open science and open innovation approaches to valorization. If you want to know more about knowledge valorization, then I also want to advertise for an event organized by our colleagues in DGRTD E2. They are working directly on knowledge valorization. They are next week organizing the annual flagship event on knowledge valorization, where there will be keynote speakers and different specialized sessions. There will also be a booth on EOSC, where I will be there together with colleagues to explain about the EOSC and its relevance for knowledge valorization, and to ensure the stakeholders on knowledge valorization will know more about the many great initiatives of EOSC. But you can see the QR code here, where you can go into the website and sign up for the event. Then another important point to make is that, of course, there are synergies between intellectual property management and open science. And these synergies, they can be explored further. And they are also directly being supported by Horizon Europe called Topics. And one of the ongoing projects we have is the intellectual property to support open science, also called the IP for OS, a project that was started here in the beginning of 2025 and will last until the end of 2026. So it is following the recommendation in the codes of practice on the intellectual assets management, the one I presented before. And then they are boosting the capacities of research performing organizations across Europe to manage intellectual property in a way that supports open science. So then through providing tools, organizing workshops and webinars to ensure a greater capacity in this area. And then they're also developing a synergy framework with best practice, which will be relevant in the discussions on how to ensure that the EOSC Federation can better contribute to knowledge valorization. And fortunately, we have the project coordinator, Julia, with us here today, who will later give you many more details on this project. And there will be another call topic. I guess you might have seen it is on the website. You can see the draft call topics for 2026-2027. It still needs to be approved by the program committee, but we have not yet seen any objections, so I guess there will only be some slight adjustments to this call topic. And it is about the potential of EOSC for knowledge valorization. So then there will be a beneficiary working towards these specific outcomes that are outlined in the slide. And you will also be able to find, if you go and have a look at the work program. So then looking at the opportunities and barriers from the current legal framework on the knowledge valorization process, and then to ensure that research performing organizations and their researchers, they will be better able to use the many knowledge resources in the EOSC Federation for collaboration with industry, and also that they provide their resources in a way that enables industry-academia collaboration. So I definitely encourage you to have a look at the work program and this specific project that is upcoming. And yeah, just an overview of the key topics for discussion at this session. So firstly, we will explore the potential of and the possible timeline for the EOSC Federation to facilitate knowledge valorization and industry-academia collaboration, given the achievements of the EOSC Federation builder phase, which has been showcased here at the EOSC Symposium 2025, then to identify possible legal and technical barriers to boost capacity of researchers, their organizations and private companies to valorize the resources provided in the EOSC Federation, and lastly to analyze how we can improve the framework and the incentives for contributors to EOSC Federation to make their resources available to innovators, deep tech startups, and emerging from academia. Then before we give the floor to our great panelists, then we will have a poll just to test your knowledge on the knowledge valorization and also your opinion on how we can improve the framework of the EOSC Federation on the knowledge valorization. So let's see, we have the first question here. Just in one word, what comes to your mind when you think of knowledge valorization? So please go in and put your word. I see many different words appearing on the screen. It also shows how complex a topic it is. But I did see the first work, vague, really underscoring that we need further discussion in this area, but of course also many words relating just to say market and capitalism, and also moving a bit more into the commercial sector, more than we have been used to work. And impact, important, being highlighted. Of course, it should also have a broader impact, you can say both something that can be used commercially and contributing to competitiveness. Great, thanks. Let's move to the next question. So, what do you see as the biggest barriers to valorize knowledge assets of the EOSC Federation? Please try to see if you can provide short answers or perhaps just one word, 1 or 2 words. See, licenses, definitely a topic we will study, and lack of understanding. That's also why we have this session, and we will have more call topics. Fragment legal framework, attitude towards companies. I think also, perhaps a change of mindset also needed on both sides, both from companies and also from academia to ensure closer collaboration. No clear rules and procedure. I think that's also something we're going to work on. Great. Then I think we move to the last question. Which actions should be taken to ensure the EOSC Federation can facilitate industry-academia collaboration? Capacity building, something done via the Horizon Europe projects, open dialogue, so mental readiness, so that's a sign of the need of change of culture and the approach to industry-academia collaboration. Many thanks for your good inputs. We will take them into account and also use them here for the later discussion we will have here at this session. Then I suggest we move here to the first speakers, if you can change to the slides. Yeah. So you have I will first then give an overview of the speakers we have here today. So we have Kasper Skalli, who is a researcher in intellectual property and technology law at the Institute for Information Law at Amsterdam Law School. Then we have Julia Pries Buchheit, who is a professor at Kiel University and also the coordinator for the IP for OS projects. Then Ignacio Blanquet, who is EOSC Association director and also professor at the Valencia Polytechnic University. Then we have Alejandro Aviles, who is CEO and founder of the CERN spin-off Unconventional. And lastly, we have Alessandro Fascio, who's my colleague in the commission, working in the Joint Research Center, also known as JRC. And then we can go here to the first presentation. Yeah, so then I will invite Ignacio Blanquet to the stage. Then as representative of the tripartite governance, he will explain a bit further how we have worked with the links with industry so far in knowledge valorization and what could be the possible ways forward. So Ignacio, the floor is yours.
So, good afternoon or good morning. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'll try to give a presentation that try to give some facts which are coming from the association, and some personal views with what could be the barriers and the opportunities, right? So let me first, I mean, I know that you know pretty well how is the tripartite, how is the structure of EOSC, but it's important to understand also what are the connections that we have with the industry, right? So as you know, EOSC is tripartite. Have countries, we have a commission, we have the association, there's co-programmed partnerships, and within the association we have a set of members. So we have over 250 members, but only a few of them, I would say 7, are coming from industry. Most of them are SMEs, right? Also we have advisory groups and task forces. In the task forces, we have people that are not only from the association and members from all the ecosystem. I would say that around 40% of the members, of the experts of the task forces come outside from institutions of the association. Even there, the participation of industry is low. It's around 5% of the experts are coming from industry, right? So, and we have created a group, a special advisory group on integration and improvement the relation with industry and data spaces, and created a task force on health data. But still, even in this group, the participation is low. So it's something that we have to improve. But it is not, I would say, a criticism or a bad news. It's actually the situation in which we are building up the EOSC, and therefore the uptake is now expected to come. And I will take that as the basis, the Strategic Research and Innovation Agenda, the SRIA. So the SRIA is the main document in which we define the principles through this co-programmed partnership for the building up of EOSC. It basically has three main pillars: the one related with data, the one related with people for changing the practices and improving the recognition, and the data is for improving the reusability and the FAIR principles, and the third one is to the construction of this federated infrastructure that will support it. In this area, there are specific objectives related to more global views, like the SO7. I'm sorry, I cannot read it from here. I try to reach my memory. So that addresses the societal challenges, but more explicitly, we have the SO, the Strategic Objective 8, which explicitly mentions collaboration with the public, the general public sector and private sectors, and especially the data spaces. So there's an objective in the strategic to deal with that. And more precisely, in the last multi-annual report, which is the document that is prepared by the association to help defining the priorities in the work program, there's a priority on the use cases for industry for the national level. So, I mean, this is something that is considered. If we go in detail in this strategic research and innovation agenda, this figure that has been kept active from the very first version of the SRIA defines these stages that we have in EOSC. We start with this minimal viable EOSC making the preparation and the growing, and then from 2025 onwards until 2027 is when we started the preparation of the uptake of the wider public sector and the private sector. So I will say that now is according to the plan, the time to speed up on the integration and the uptake of EOS services by the industry. Okay, so then I will go a little next. So one of the clear points of collaboration are the data spaces. Data spaces are industry-driven, are created for fostering innovation, and EOS has been seen as this cross-cutting data space for research. Cross-cutting because it addresses many different areas that relates with different data spaces. I mean, there's this transversal European data spheres for science, research, and innovation that try to focus this collaboration on understanding the legal frameworks for data sharing, identifying and comparing standards in industry and research, and the preparation of the digital object with the requirements of the industry, because there are additional requirements that we don't consider in the normal workflow of research in academia. The awareness that is important also that there are activities related to scientific and the industry, and evaluating the interoperability and sharing good practices. One of the clear examples that we have there is the Task Force on Health Data. This task force has been created to bridge the activities in EOSC related with health and the European health data space. And the main activity is to have this strategic view of EOSC aligned with the health data. There are many details with respect to the regulation, many things to learn from the regulation and the way that it has been created, and to understand how the use of EOS data is fair, but now fair in lower letters, not in the terms of the findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability, but also impartial and just. Also foster the interoperability. There are many things developed in the context of EOS that are of interest of the HDS and vice versa. There are standards that are being developed that are really relevant for us, and there are good practices, services that has been maximized. I would say that the way in which the data is collected is totally different, and therefore we are quite complementary. And mobilizing this network and partnerships. We are about to produce the first deliverable, which is the identification of gaps, redundancies, and possible synergies. And again, this is the demonstration of this knowledge valorization with industry, because HDS is quite innovation oriented. So these are the facts. Let's take some personal views of what I see barriers and opportunities. First, I see recognition. I understand that there's a fear of releasing the data for being used in the industry, because sometimes we lose the track of the recognition. There are many models that we don't know which where the data has been used to train them, and then the scientists feel a little, unrecognized on this. However, regulations are being improving this part. AI Act, Data Act, HDS are really improving a lot on the part of the traceability and the identification of the sources of the data. Second is quality, but quality, maybe I didn't use the right word. Quality in the sense that the way in which the data has to be prepared and collected and in research and industry may be different. For example, let me take again the health sector area. If you want to go for the certification of software of medical device, there are some consideration in the data that you will have to consider. There are fair and quality standards are really the point. And quickly, the other 2 points I see: licensing. The community is quite used to use software licenses for software developed, open licenses for it, but I think that the use of the data licenses which already exist is not so popular in many cases. And finally, the management of restricted data, that there has to be, it's complex in the sense, and the reusability of this data requires more double thought with the industry. I mean, there are data that will not be preferred to be used for specific industrial cases. But there are regulations. And with this, I finish my presentations.
Many thanks to Ignacio. Then I will give the floor to Kasper Skalling, who as a legal expert will help us to navigate in the legal context for valorization of knowledge resources in the EOSC Federation. So Kasper, the floor is yours.
Right. Thank you so much for having me here. It's a pleasure to be on this session, in my case, from the unforgiving lens of copyright. Science, as we know, is tricky business. That's because it involves collaboration across borders and within borders, relies on a lot of transfers of data, access, reuse. There's that part of science that is about advancing society and the state of the art, and the part behind the scenes, the administration of it. And just how tricky the business of science can be, we sought out to find and explore in a study that we carried out for the Commission last year, where we mapped the landscape looking at different OS policies, even national copyright legislation, data legislation, and how researchers and publishers and research performing organizations deal with this in their daily operations. If you haven't sorted out your autumn reading, I highly recommend this 1,200-page report. The executive summary is much more manageable, of course. But the surveys that we carried out reveal a rather uncomfortable truth. And that is that while we may be very good at building infrastructures for data access and sharing, we might not have come as far with building legal infrastructures for the same purpose. Now, I'm not here to give you the bad news, but rather to place it in context. And the context is this. We can think of copyright in one sense as providing exclusive rights. These exclusive rights are very broad, and copyright balances that with so-called copyright exceptions to enable certain uses. For example, scientific use give expression to various kinds of interest. And I took the liberty of looking into the EOSC handbook. There's a fantastic table that explains what kind of data is part of the infrastructure. I think that for discussing copyright challenges and issues, the first 4 or 5 categories are very much relevant. Of course, publications, various types of data, software, all of these things are protected by copyright to a smaller and bigger extent, and basically activate the system. And the point really is that with a system of exclusive rights, you have to look for the exception that allows you to do certain things. Now, the other way to think about copyright in this context is through a relationship or chain of creation and exploitation, which is that knowledge institutions create a lot of information that is protected through copyright, through exclusive rights. In legal terms, those rights are exploited, eventually ending up in the creation of new information or data that is protected and so on. So it goes circularly. And in an infrastructure like EOSC, you could go as far as to say that copyright is designed to make it work, where researchers or partners collaborate with each other, want to share and access information and so on. So the question is, where's the issues? And looking or sharing some results from this report, well, if you look into the copyright exceptions that do exist, there's a few general exceptions enabling research, but they're all limited by a significant limitation that they enable research to the extent justified by the non-commercial purpose to be achieved. There's a couple of other aspects relating to fragmentation of the system in the EU, such as the ability to either introduce this provision or not, or there may be certain variations in terms of the balance that is drawn in the different member states, which translates into there's a different way of having to approach things nationally. There's another more tailored copyright exception enabling text and data mining that is very generously defined as more or less the use of automated tools to generate information, but is limited to research organizations, cultural heritage institutions. The preamble to the law that introduces this is the DSM directive says that public-private partnerships should not be precluded, and the beneficiaries of this exception, the research organizations, CHIs, should be able to rely on their private partners to carry out TDM. So immediately that raises questions about what's the actual role of the private partner in a collaborative project, for example. Can they only carry out the TDM and that's it, or can they be more transparently involved? So for the sake of completeness, there is another provision too that is more broader, allowing text and data mining, which certainly fits for private partners, but it is subject to an opt-out rule, which may result in the fact that, the right holder says, we don't want you to text and data mine. That can have negative consequences, but also very positive in the case of you're dealing with confidential data in your data set. Now, the importance of this from a knowledge valorization point of view is of course related to the fact that everybody is involved in some sort of collaboration. So the study that we carried out revealed that 91% of the research performing organizations are involved in some sort of projects with private sector partners. Funding schemes, many funding schemes even require the participation of a private sector partner as a mode to immediately valorize research, or at least towards the end of the project. But the study also revealed that about 40% of RPOs will see that there are problems on a regular basis that are related to the uncertainty of the system and translating into a fear of using copyright-protected resources because they're not sure if the copyright exception covers the use or not. And that can either manifest itself into, we don't want to use the resource because we're unsure, or we really want to use this resource, but we're not sure if our partner can use it, so we would prefer to not include them for a particular task or so, creating quite a lot of additional and perhaps unnecessary workflow. Now, 70% of course supported clarification of the system. So what applies? Ultimately, it all boils down to what I call here innovation lifecycle problems. So if we think about the innovation lifecycle as involving 3 simple steps, the actual research, applied development, and then towards the end, some sort of creation of a product or service, these provisions essentially limit the analysis to the very first step. That may not correspond to patterns of collaboration and research today if we think of science as a one-man show involving the creation of information without any further steps translating into practical application. So how do we deal with this? As a copyright lawyer and expert, I have to always say, first, never think of the EU as the US. Obviously, we're not the US, but in copyright discussions, we often hear the magic term fair use. We don't think in those terms. That's for worse and for better, because we regulate things in the EU slightly differently. partly because of the exceptions that we have. The TDM exceptions are a great example, which the US does not have, and that's the reason why there's about 30 or so or even more cases concerning the development of AI, which we don't have in Europe. It is, I think, 3 or 4 cases. Then we also protect things that the US does not protect, such as databases. So one quick way of resolving certain barriers is, of course, so to say, quick fixes to the legal framework, removing the non-commercial purpose requirement. That does not mean of itself there's carte blanche for everyone to do what they want. Copyright has a way of dealing with different interests. It only opens up for public-private partnerships more transparently. Adding computer programs, which today cannot constitute the object of research, that's slightly awkward in the system, I must say. But good law may not always be enough. At operational level, that's where the institutional lawyers and data stewards and project officers live. Uncertainty and unpredictability can turn into inaction or over-compliance. So we are risk-averse as research institutions. We want clarity. Even if we might have the space, we still prefer to have things written down simply because there's a reputation to protect as well. We're not there to test the limits of the law, so to say. And I think that a possible way of going forward is to really exploit the ownership that is inevitably created in the data that will be part of or is part of EOSC. There's a term, if you've come across computer licensing, licensed software, called copyleft. The idea with that is that you use the rights that exist in order to provide a very broad license, and in that way you provide certainty in the system, saying you can do this, you can do that, instead of a more prohibitive proprietary approach. There's a couple of examples here that I provide. Creative Commons licenses are designed in that way. You may have seen a share-alike requirement in a Creative Commons license, which is that you receive very broad permissions, often exceeding the statutory permissions, on condition that you also promise to release whatever it is that you're generating on the same or generous terms. Now, with that in mind, given the variety and complexity of the data that is embedded in EOSC, I think it's really time to perhaps consider the introduction of proper, well, I call it here, EU scientific use licenses that may be designed to express various policy objectives. For example, this is the kind of data that we want to share to everyone. This is the kind of data that includes some sort of confidentiality requirements and cannot be shared in the same manner or used by particular parties and is also regulated by other frameworks, or that simply provide confidence in the system and, so to say, patch the shortcomings, such as the inability to use for commercial purposes information. So I'm probably minus 2 minutes right now, so I just want to finish with one last reflection, which is that if we want to, for knowledge valorization to thrive in the system, we don't only need infrastructure and data, we do need confidence in the system so that the participants know what the rules are. And I think that will significantly contribute to establishing a predictable framework. Thank you so much. I'm sorry.
Really thanks to Kasper. Now we'll give the floor to Alejandro. So as a CEO and founder of CERN Spinoff, he can give inspiration on how to generate a startup for research results, and also give us a bit more knowledge of what are the needs for the private sector to engage more in industry, academia, collaboration. So Alejandro, the floor is yours.
Thank you, everyone. I don't know what happened with the text there. It says software engineer. Yeah, it's been an honor to be invited to EOSC. And in fact, I am a bit of an outsider here, an outlier in this conference, I find. I find not too many people from industry in the audience. And so I would like to share an outsider perspective and share a bit of my trajectory with this CERN spin-off, some of the challenges that I have found along the ways, and from that very limited perspective of a small startup, share some reflections of what is something that it could help people in a similar position as us, and also highlight one topic that I find not commented so often, which is open source. So Unconventional, it's a startup now. In this November, it's been 3 years since we are operating. We're Swiss-based in Geneva. We are a CERN spin-off, and we are offering services around Indico, which perhaps you have some idea of what it is. Maybe a show of hands. Anyone knows what Indico is? Yeah? Nice, nice. So Indico is an event management software developed by CERN. I was one of the core developers, and now through Unconventional, what we're doing is development, both for the open source project, customizations for different clients, user support, and hosting for organizations that don't have the capacity to host it themselves. So already EOSC is hosting the program in Indico on the CERN instance. Besides the program, it offers many other functionality like registrations and paper reviewing, which was not used here. And I would say that one of the strengths of Indico is precisely that it's open source, and over 20 years, it has accumulated not just the development efforts from CERN, but from many other organizations that were relying on it. So, where is the image? This is tragic because the image showed Jesus offering bread to the masses. Oh, here it is, yes. So I wanted to talk a little bit of how Indico is already a success story of knowledge valorization and how it's been providing value to different stakeholders. And through it, a little bit of my story. So in 2002, which is already quite some time ago, CERN launches the Indico open source project. Already many years after that, I joined in 2013 as one of the developers. Then 2017, the UN in Geneva adopts Indico as their platform for conference management. And in 2019, I joined them as a contractor. And this shows that Indico, that was initially offering value to the research community at CERN, went way beyond its borders. And by 2020, there were already more than 300 organizations using Indico. And not just using Indico, but many of them contributing back. And this is, again, thanks to being an open source platform that allows it to be used without any additional cost, at least licensing cost. Still, around that time, I realized that there were some pitfalls. And I started discussing with the Indico maintainers and with CERN knowledge transfer, because Indico doesn't have a lot of support outside of CERN. CERN has limited development capacity and support capacity. It's a complex project, so if you want to make contributions, it may take you some time to get them included in the project. And then if your organization is planning to rely heavily on Indico, there is an unclear governance structure towards the future of the project. So I started the conversation around 2020, 2022. Then I launched the company, but it took 2 more years until we got the green light to be a CERN spin-off. And only this year we've been included in the Indico consultative board that steers the future of the project, which is also a necessity for us to rely on it as the company grows. So this was me happily going without understanding what I was getting into. And I have identified some challenges. Some of them I did not suffer, but I can identify that these challenges are going to be much more tragic for other startups. So first of all, licensing, because it's open source and the license allows public use of it, we didn't need to wait for CERN to give us the green light. But for other technologies, unless you have a very clear statement from the IP owners that you can actually build a company with it, it is a complete showstopper. Then funding, for certain technologies that have more disruptive potential, maybe there is investment that is easy to find, but for open source businesses, in my experience, it has been very difficult to find anyone that is willing to invest and to support the development of open source through commercial business. And then, as a consequence of not being able to find investment, I had to grow the company through client work and therefore going through procurement. And our clients are institutional clients that have rather stringent procurement procedures, so this makes the process quite slow. So I was lucky, again, because Indico is open source, but we had the CERN Venture Connect program that standardizes the transition from knowledge at CERN towards the outside. We have been lucky to establish partnerships with different research institutes and other institutional stakeholders. And here I would like to bring up the notion that, at least in our case, and this is not going to be the case for every industry player in the space, what we're doing is we're aggregating resources from different organizations that do not have the capacity to improve Indico. They do it through us, but precisely because Indico is open source, there could be other companies alongside us that could improve Indico. And not only that, once we improve Indico, we are improving it for the entire ecosystem of Indico users. And this makes me think not just of knowledge valorization, but knowledge revalorization, and creating virtuous cycles and circular economies that will accelerate the development of what I consider public infrastructure. Because open source lies, it has not been central in all the discussions around open science, but then when listening to the different operational teams in EOSC, they all mention open source. And I believe that open source is one of the key building blocks of open science and open society at large. So perhaps, what could EOSC do for other startup founders that were not as lucky as myself? And this is a non-comprehensive list of ideas based on the challenges that we experienced in terms of licensing, perhaps taking some proven examples like the CERN Venture Connect that provides a standard framework of how to transfer that knowledge to industry. Could there be a set of templates that EOSC promotes to the different institutes for them to accelerate this transition? Could there be some connection with venture capital that is more friendly towards open source, open science, open society, that would want to accelerate these virtuous cycles through business? And procurement, this I understand very well why organizations may want to have very stringent restrictions on procurement processes, but if I could ask for something, please don't make it more complicated than it already is. And with this, I finish. Thank you very much.
Many thanks to Alejandro. Now it's time to hear from Julia, who will present the IP Focus project, and just to explain the tools generated from the project and how they can be used in the EOSC Federation to help the valorization of the many knowledge resources that will be provided. So, Julia, the floor is yours.
Bertel tends to promise a lot when I'm on stage, so let's see, okay? Many of you know me as the EOSC support, so I'm in EOSC since 3 to 4 years, and I support more or less all training task forces or engagement task forces. Today I have another hat, so this is my profession. I'm a professor for education. I specialize in higher education. capacity building. And this is a project we are leading from Kiel University. So as Bertel just said, we are in our first year, so I can show you a little bit where we are on our way, and then at the end show you what possibilities might arise also to combine it with EOSC. So at the beginning we already had the slide on what is knowledge valorization. There is a specific definition from the European Commission. I didn't bring it with me. Because as you can see in this wonderful graphic, whoever you ask, they will answer you something differently. Yeah? So what I want to stress is that knowledge valorization is always one step more. Yeah? So if you think about knowledge valorization, yeah, it's something like we want to have more value. Yeah? And this can have very, very different colors. Yeah? So this is the steps to achieve that. Yeah? Can have very different colors. So IP4OS concentrates on two things. As it is in the title, it concentrates on intellectual property management or rights, or whatever you are. If you're a lawyer, you say rights. If you're not a lawyer, you say management, just to be on the safe side. And on open science as a movement, but also on open science in a sense of open science practices. And now the big question is, how do they relate, these two things? Yeah? If you ask people outside, they often answer, oh no, these are contradictory things. Yeah? So the one IP is here, open science is here, yeah, and it's very difficult. Why do they answer that? It's because when you look into universities, you can see there are always, to 90% across Europe, we have two teams. We have the open science team and we have the transfer team, yeah, the knowledge transfer team. The knowledge transfer team is more or less the representative of intellectual property, yeah? And the open science team often connected to libraries. Yeah? They are more or less the speakers for open science movement. And sometimes they do not speak to each other. That's why people say this is opposite. If you have a closer look, especially when you ask lawyers, they say, no, this goes hand in hand, no problem. We still have some issues, yeah? But they go along very well. So IP4S tries to bring that knowledge into the world. Okay. So we say it's a concerted IP-OS approach. Yeah? So we try to explain what we have in the intellectual property world and also in the open science world to actually proceed with knowledge valorization. And two terms which are also very connected to this are protection on the one side and openness on the other side. Also here, protection is not the same as intellectual property rights, yeah, and openness is not the same, but I think I speak to a very expert group here, yeah, so, but we can feel it, yeah, so this protection and openness is always a little bit with us in the room. I brought 3 examples, actually from outside EOSC, the EOSC world, which we found in our studies, which show how intellectual property rights and also management in open science can align very well. Yeah, but these are only 3. So these are 3 examples. There are many, many more. So the first one is actually Impact Ventures. It's an enterprise from Belgium. And it applies impact-based IP licenses for passive cooling technologies. So don't ask me exactly what that is, yeah, but this is a company who concentrates on research outputs, yeah, and the research outputs are these cooling technologies, and they organize the licensing so that these technologies, which are developed by researchers, can be used again. So it's very specific, yeah, but this is an example which works very well. What they actually do is they specify, so the rights they apply and the agreements they apply, they specify the purposes and also the geographies where these research outputs can then be used. So this is a fit-for-purpose IP, supporting open and responsible innovation. As I said, this is only one example. Actually, yours is also very good, but I knew that you were talking before me, so I didn't pull it out. What I also want to do with these 3 examples is show you how big this field is. Yeah? So we were with licensing on technologies, and now we jump to open science collaboration. I think that's a very interesting one for EOSC. So there is an enterprise called Conscience from Canada. Maybe you know Richard Gold. He is like the advocate for it. And they work in the health sector. What they do is they organize collaborations between the private sector and the public sector. They support with legal knowledge so that they have agreements, so that they have an open working phase at the beginning, and they decide, okay, how long are we going to work together? How long are we going to share everything? Yeah? When is the cutting point? Yeah? And then they start, they concentrate on rare diseases. Yeah? So this is something very specific. And after this cutting point, they are competitive again. This works very, very well. Yeah, so this is a really a very good success story. So here you can see that timing is a very important thing in this combination between IP and OS, and also the reuse level. With whom am I sharing? Yeah, it's not always the open in a sense, the whole world. But now let's go to the open whole world. Yeah, I also have that with me to show you how broad it is. So this is on academic knowledge dissemination. Some fields, for example, education, I never thought about a patent. Yeah, what the hell should I patent? Nobody would pay money for that. Yeah, so for us it's important. Yeah, I know. Yeah, there are some specific cases. Yeah, but not in my field. So for us it's important that our knowledge comes into the world to as many people as possible, yeah? So that we do not reinvent the wheel in each region, so that we can learn from each other. It's like this saying, science and research is standing on each other's shoulders. Yeah, this is the speaking often from the philosophical department. Yeah? And here, of course, we have the Creative Commons licensing. Yeah? And as Kasper just said, I think Europe has to step up a little bit. Yeah? But it's, are you already standing that I have to finish? Okay. What brings IP for us? We have a wonderful website, yeah, but it's written there. We will soon there will be something, but actually the soon is now, yeah. So what we have a simple rubric for knowledge valorization. What we do is we bring together multi-professional teams because what we realized is I'm not a lawyer, I cannot answer that, and I do not want to learn that. The researcher is not a lawyer. The researcher is no transfer person, yeah. So what we do, I'm going to just here, is we say the best way to go right now, what we know is we bring together in one organization or in one consortium or collaboration the people who are important for knowledge valorization. And these are quite a lot. You can see here. Yeah, maybe you even add the ethics person or a different one. And they can use, I just show back, this simple rubric so that they can develop a common language. It's very difficult for them to talk to each other, yeah, because they come from very different fields. Kasper and I are the best example, actually. I heard you now the third time, and I start to understand you, yeah. So, yeah, this is something we bring into the world. We train in 27 countries. We start in January. So we train single organizations who voluntarily say we want to establish such a team. We bring knowledge for how to establish such a team, but also in each specific field, libraries, research managers, knowledge transfer people, we do deepening sessions. Yeah, I don't do them because I don't know it, yeah, but we have the people in our consortium who can do that. Yeah, so we deepen the knowledge of each person, and then we bring them together. So let's see. Oh, okay, going forward, yes. So that was the question. So what could I imagine for EOSC? So I think actually this multi-professional team approach is a very nice one. It's a bit different in EOSC, yeah, with the nodes, but I could imagine that each node also could have such a multi-professional team. That's the first one. And of course, we can learn from each other how to establish that. The second one is policy-making endeavors. As Kasper just said, not everything is in the right place when we look at on the legal level. However, we first need the people who speak up for that. So it's Kasper and me and Bertel, and then maybe 10 others in Europe, yeah? Like we are going around like crazy, but we need support, yeah? So we do need these multi-professional teams then to speak up and say, okay, let's do something. Yeah? So this is for Europe, but also, of course, for the EOSC Federation. We will have a synergy framework in which this concerted IPOS approach is explained, also with examples and what does that mean, actually what I just did now, but in very much detail. And we hope that EOSC will take that up to develop it further and also to use it. And yes, you already showed it. So there is this new call coming up for knowledge valorization in EOSC. So I think, let's come together and think about how we can actually then bring it into practice. Am I good? Oh, yeah, thank you.
Many thanks to Julia. And then as the last speaker, I will invite Alessandro to the stage. Alessandro from JRC, who will give some perspectives on knowledge transfers and how to ensure data-driven innovation. So Alessandro, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's afternoon already. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Alessandro Fazio, and I come from the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. I think most people know the JSC as an organization that provides scientific and technical advice to policy development, but we are also a research center. So the challenge that I have today, having been in the business for almost 20 years, is to tell you a little bit how all of this looks from the perspective of those of us that are trying to turn research and knowledge from laboratory applications to products and services that are out there on the market. Now, before anything else, from where I stand, I think EOSC success isn't really about, it cannot be measured simply in terms of openness or fair principles. What matters is whether the data that is made available actually fuels innovation, especially for startups and scale-ups. And the real value of data emerges not when data is taken by itself, but when it is combined with expertise, infrastructure, knowledge, services, and it is made usable. And I think in order to do that, we need to create the frameworks and the incentives that actually incentivize reuse, co-development, and measurable impact. And I think one thing that some of you may not know, this is actually fully aligned with some broader policy developments at the Commission, in particular the Startup and Scale-up strategy that we've published in May and the European Innovation Act that will follow next year, that really emphasize the importance of unlocking knowledge assets and infrastructures, including data for entrepreneurial use. Now, at the JSC, as a research center, we've worked on a number of projects that show how public data and data more in general can underpin real-world applications, going from the use of Copernicus data to environmental data sets and so on and so forth. And I think what that shows is that even modest data sets, when they are combined with appropriate know-how, can lead to interesting operational applications and commercial services. And there's evidence that you can translate outcomes when the conditions are right. And I have a few examples here of things that we have done specifically at the JSC. Some of them are proof of concept level projects, some of them are already protected IP, but all of them are based on the use of data from using GNSS signals and data sets from field tests to aggregate data collected from mobile phones and spot the origins of signal interference, for example, the use of jammers, or navigating by the stars, as it were. We use pulsar timing, the data sets combined with detectors and telescopes as a new and very innovative navigation system. Again, the use of Copernicus data that we used to deliver automatic land coverage intelligence that is already deployed as a cloud platform. It's used by the World Food Programme, it's used by disaster risk management authorities. And some other things, for example, we are using data from multiple sensors that we use to identify malicious drones, something very topical today that we are piloting in one of our living labs. We use environmental data to monitor volatile organic compounds, and this is technology that is already licensed to industrial partners out there. Or we also use the NSS atmospheric signals data to improve problems related to space weather interference in signals. And I mean, this is relatively modest stuff. And many of these projects were really started as proof of concept or targeted collaborations, but they've led to patents, they've led to licensed technology and to some services that are now deployed and being used both by public authority and industry. And from where I stand, the key is the same as I said before. It's not just the data access is not enough. Context and validation and credibility make the data usable. And I think what EOSC can do is to help to systematize this project at scale and to operate as a bridge between the research-based and actual innovators that want to develop products and services. And I think we need to think about the business models for valorizing data. Whether it's data as a service or analytics as a service or co-development with innovators. I mean, a lot of startups and a lot of SMEs very often lack the capacity to host or process large volumes of data, and EOS can lower these barriers by providing a scalable and trusted environment. And I think we can go beyond that to incentivize use, perhaps whether it's through voucher schemes or challenge programs that can actually encourage companies to experiment with our data sets and to create new applications. I think the real bottleneck, again, it's not access, it's translation. So we need the intermediaries, data translators, brokers, testbeds, who can connect the data with the innovators. And I think EOSC could quite easily operate as a federating entity, linking with accelerators, linking with the EIC or the EIT programs that already work very closely with startups and scale-ups and really become a digital backbone that connects Europe's research infrastructures, universities, venture builders, and whatever have you. And last but not least, a few words on how this fits with the startup and scale-up strategy. I mean, the objective obviously is to turn scientific excellence into tangible economic value, and the strategy that we have published in May identifies data access as one of the main bottlenecks to scaling innovation, and this is precisely an area where EOS can make a difference by offering startups a platform that they can use to validate ideas, test algorithms, and lowering the cost of experimentations, which for companies in sectors like AI or climate tech or biotech or materials is very often one of the single biggest barriers. And maybe a final word on our upcoming European Innovation Act that next year, when it is eventually published, will put a lot of emphasis on regulatory sandboxes. And I think EOSC could in many ways operate as a sandbox itself for access to data for innovators, where they can test algorithms, they can test models and services in a controlled environment. And that is very much in line with what we are trying to do. I think that's where I stop for now. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Many thanks to Alessandro, and many thanks to all of our panelists for their great contributions to this discussion. Time is running, so unfortunately we need to skip the Q&A session. We need to move quickly to the plenary for the final debate. Please go there directly. Lunch will only be afterwards. And before we go there, I would just like to say thank you very much for joining our session and for your contribution through Slido to the discussion. We hope you found it interesting, and it will inspire you to engage in these discussions in EOSC on how we can use EOSC as a facilitator for industry-academia collaboration. And with those words, I would just like to wish you a good rest of the conference.